I can really recommend being a foster carer for Notts County Council. There's always someone walking the journey alongside you, whether that's other foster carers or social workers. It really helps to provide stability and consistency for children who really need it, and that's really rewarding as a foster carer.
Roger and I have been fostering for 35 years. We do deal with challenges, but to say we've been doing it for 35 years to me proves that it's not impossible. We learn an awful lot from these young people, and even now we're still learning.
As a foster family, we care, we want to make a difference, and we get so much fulfilment from fostering. The satisfaction of making a difference is something that money can't buy. Just seeing the smiles on the children's faces and helping them reach their potential is wonderful.
We work as family workers within the fostering service for Nottinghamshire County Council.
I really enjoy my work. I really enjoy meeting lots of different foster carers.
You know, we get to know the families, we get to know the kids, and we care, basically. It's important as it is to them that the kids are getting the support that they need.
A lot of people said to me they would like to be a foster carer, but there's something stopping them. I had that as well. And we decided just to jump in and do it and see what happened. And for us, it's been the best decision we've ever made.
It's been a fantastic decision, it really has, yes.
Once people start to become a foster carer and take that leap to do it, they'll understand how much it gives back, not just to the child, but how much it empowers you as well.
I'm Leon, I'm a care leaver, and I've been in care since I was 8. I've been with the same parents since, and they're amazing. Like, they are my foster parents, but I do class them as my parents, my mum and dad. All a child wants really from a family is to be supported, loved and cared for, and know they're there because they're wanted. From personal experience, I know the difference it's made for my life.
We always say that we foster as a whole family. It's not just us who are the carers, our children are involved in that. And even now, people express concern about the effect on our birth children of foster caring. I think we need to kind of get past that and dispel that myth, because actually the overall effect on our children, I think, is positive. They're learning new skills, they're gaining empathy, they're interacting with children from different backgrounds. For a long time, we didn't make use of support care, and we wanted our child to settle into our placement and not feel pushed out, but it's actually been really helpful for us to start to have support care.
We've known Zoe for a number of years, and it's meant that we got to know her foster child. So for her, it's been like coming for a sleepover rather than a feeling she's coming to another family. I got into fostering for Notts County Council, and it was something that I've always wanted to do. But working full-time and my husband also working full-time, we thought it's not really going to be something we can do now. But after looking at the website, we realised there was this wonderful thing called support care that we were able to offer. It might surprise you, but actually I'm under 30. I don't have any children of my own, and that doesn't stop you from being a foster carer.
I think some people don't go into foster care because they think it's going to be really costly to have another child living in their house, but actually the fostering allowance is generous enough to cover all the costs of having a child living with you.
We have a lot of fun on the weekends when we have foster children in. We get to go to parks, ice skating, children's events, trampoline in parks like I Jump. We get access to the Max card, which is a discount card for foster carers and their children to access different local amenities. Also recently we went on holiday and we were able to use the Max card to get free access to some castles and historical places because it's a national initiative. We chose to go with Notts County Council because of the support care that was offered and the training. And it's always local to Nottinghamshire. My parents are foster carers for an agency and they found it really difficult to get support care for their child.
My name's Lynn. I am now a support foster carer. We were mainstream carers, but given our ages, we felt that we couldn't commit to children for long term anymore. We just find it really rewarding, the relationships we build up with these young people, and we feel we're perhaps a bit like grandparents to them. With the children coming here for weekends, this enables their mainstream carers to have a break, and this makes things more secure perhaps for the children to continue there. I work with my supervising social worker to sort out the dates. She comes out to see us every month, and it's all very relaxed. I find Robin really easy to speak to. She listens to my concerns, and I value what she is saying to me in return.
The benefits of a supervising social worker are always having someone to contact. There is also emergency duty team that they can contact on a weekend and out of hours. I think the times that it gets difficult is when, you know, she's supported a child for a long time and then they're either moving on out of area or they're moving on because they've reached the age of 18, you know, and she has to say goodbye to that child, so that can be always emotionally draining. Generally, it's staying in touch so they know that you do care about them and you are concerned, you know, that the impact that something like that has had on them.
You do feel fully supported. It's like working in a team. We still even now go on training sessions. I almost look forward to those sessions because you meet other foster carers there and it's very interesting. I've always fostered with my husband, who's brilliant, and I feel personally I couldn't do it without him. He's super with the kids, and it's just something we continue to enjoy doing. A lot of our friends feel at the ages we are, we shouldn't be doing it, but it's a way of life for us now.
I'm Mark. I'm a foster carer dad in the family. I'm the fun dad, if you like. I've tried to be anyway, try to be.
And I'm Amy, a foster carer. So we have 4 children of our own, and then we foster younger children into our family. Being a foster carer is a devastating privilege. It's devastating that children have to be in this situation, and yet what a privilege that we are able to help them.
Yeah.
When you foster as a family. I think it's very important that everybody in your house is involved, and even though we have 4 children of our own, we don't find that a challenge, we find that quite an easy thing to do. Daniel particularly, he's older and he sees more and he understands more because he's older, and he feels that it's given him an insight as to when he's older and he has his own children. Whenever a placement ends, we always ask them, do you want to do it again? Would you like another child? And it's always yes. And even though we've had the sadness maybe of a child leaving, and they are sad when a child leaves, the positive that we get out of it, they get to see, as we do, the happiness when a child leaves us, and that inspires them as well to want to do it again and again and again, as well as us.
When a child leaves, it's sad for us, but it's happy for them.
The biggest thing for us has been the support network, because if it wasn't for them, I don't think we would be able to carry on. I think it's a big, big thing to know that there's always someone there if you've ever got problems. And for our children, they really enjoy the events that we attend. We've been quite surprised at actually the amount of events there are.
Barbecues and picnics and
local supports
groups. And Foster's Got Talent. We've been to the Christmas do's and the Sons and Daughters events here today are fantastic for our children. They really enjoy it, and I think it's a lovely thing for them to do.
And it's very empowering for them to know that they're appreciated as a child in a foster family.
Are we up and running, Keith? Right, okay. So the first thing on the agenda, the minutes of the last meeting held on the 12th of October, can I take those as a true record? I'm not going to be asking for named votes every time. We just ask you to put your hand up if that's okay. So if you can just put your videos on so that we can see you do that, that would be great. Okay, so we'll get to the second, which is apologies for absence. Keith?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies for absence from Councillor Kate Fall and Councillor Phil Rostance, and we have Councillor Pauline Allen attending for Councillor Fall and Councillor Richard Butler attending for Councillor Rostance.
Would you like to go through the attendance list? At this
Yes, I can indeed. Thank you, Chair. So the other members present today, as well as Councillor Allen and Councillor Butler and yourself, we have Councillor Brooks. Councillor Carr is joining us. I'm not sure if he's quite on the line at the minute. He's just had some initial difficulties, so he will be joining us. We have Councillor Handley. We have Councillor Henry, who has also had some difficulties, but I understand is on the call as we speak. We've got Councillor Madden, Councillor Sissons, Councillor Walker and Councillor Wright. And in terms of officers, Chair, as well as myself, we'll have the following officers present today. We have Marjorie Toward, Service Director. We have Nigel Stevenson, Service Director, Heather Dickinson, Group Manager, Rob Disney, Group Manager, Joe Kirkby, Team Manager, Linda Walker isn't on the call, Keith Palfreman, Group Manager, and Glenn Bicknell, Senior Accountant. As well as the officers from the County Council, we have John Gregory and Lorraine Noak from the Council's External Auditors, Grant Thornton, and we also have the Council's independent persons on the call today for item 7, so that is Ian Bain, Craig Cole and Rob White. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I welcome everybody to the meeting and specifically and importantly our independent members. So welcome Craig, Ian and Rob for attending today. You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
We'll go then straight on to agenda item 3, which is declarations of interest by members and officers, disposable or private. Are there any, please? No, it's all gone quiet over there. So we'll go straight on to agenda item number 4, which is the local government Ombudsman report. Who's doing that? I'm just looking to see who's on. Are you doing it, Heather, or?
It's me, Councillor Lawton. It's Joe Kirkby.
Oh, sorry, Joe. I couldn't see you there. Okay. Hi, Joe. Are you all right?
Hello.
Yes.
I'm very well,
welcome.
thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'll plough on if that's okay. So hopefully the report is a bit more straightforward than the one I brought to the last committee. There were 7 decisions to report to you since you last met, and they're summarised in Appendix A, and you've got the full decisions there attached to your papers as well. 6 of those decisions were complaints that were closed after initial inquiries. The Ombudsman decided not to continue with any further investigations, and Appendix A gives the reasons for that. There was 1 full investigation in relation to a complex adult social care case, and there were a number of issues, but the main one was centering around charging for respite care breaks, and the complaint was not upheld. So in terms of the report, there was nothing that the Ombudsman thought of note or wanted to investigate. There's one thing I'd add which isn't in the report but may be helpful for you all to know, which is the Ombudsman has confirmed that unlike during the last lockdown, they are not proposing to stop their work. They're going to carry on working through this lockdown, although they are asking us to liaise with them if we have any particular difficulties about responding to them. But so far, we haven't got that. We're working well with them. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
I doubt there will be any, Joe, considering looking at the reports.
Okay, I mean, it is a straightforward one to bring to this committee, yeah.
Interestingly, I'm not declaring interest, but one of my parish councillors on Farnsfield Parish Council works for the Ombudsman Department.
Ah, so right, okay.
I'm very careful what I say when I
talk about that. Are they an investigator, Councillor Lawton?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I always watch my P's and Q's. Anyway. There we go. So any comments, please, on this agenda item? No. So can I have a second of the recommendation, please?
I'll second them, Chairman.
Thank you very much. All those in favour, just put your hands up, please. Thank you very much. Okay, Keith. He's on quiet. Okay, we'll go straight then on to agenda item. Are you okay with that? You've got that?
Yes, that's fine, Councillor.
Okay, agenda item 5, statement of account. John.
I think, Chair, it's Glenn from Finance.
Sorry, Glenn.
I'm just going to briefly...
Getting everybody wrong today, so there we go.
No problem at all. I'm just going to do a quick introduction to the report, and then I'll pass over to John Gregory from Grant Thornton to take us through the Audit Findings report. So this report's to inform committee of the contents of the External Auditor's Audit Findings report for 1920, and request that approval for the final approval of the Statement of Accounts for 2019-20 be delegated to the Section 151 officer in consultation with yourself, Chair, alongside the letters of representation for both the Council and the Pension Fund accounts. As you can imagine, it's been good fun putting the Statement of Accounts together this year, with the implications of COVID and remote working and all that kind of thing for both Council officers and the external auditors. I'm sure John will allude to some of those issues when he talks shortly. However, despite all of those issues, we did manage to publish the draft pension accounts by the beginning of June and the draft council accounts by the beginning of July. Since then, the auditors have identified a couple of issues which are set out in the report and have already been adjusted. A further issues since been identified which relates to the pension liability, and there's a further adjustment to the accounts required to address that issue, which will see the pensions liability and the pensions reserve increasing slightly on the balance sheet from 1.1 billion to 1.14 billion. And this reflects the fact that the council retained the responsibility for the historic pension liabilities of those staff, those council staff that transferred to VIA. So just a quick final point, unfortunately, due to the added complexity this year, the accounts aren't yet able to be approved at this committee. So as I said earlier, we'll be proposing to get the approval delegated to Nigel as the Section 151 officer in conjunction with you, Chair. Yeah. So I'll now pass over to John Gregory from Grant Thornton to talk through the Audit Finders report for 1920, and he'll hopefully confirm that it's anticipated that he'll provide an unqualified opinion on the accounts, identify no internal control issues, and also provide an unqualified value for money opinion, subject to the usual caveats. So,
thank you very much, Glenn. It's all over to you, John. Unfortunately, I jumped the gun, so to speak. There you go.
That's fine. It was a late decision for Glenn to have a say first. Yeah, and obviously Glenn's not left me much to say. No, it's okay.
I'm sure you'll have plenty to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, clearly what you've got in front of you is the Audit Findings report, which covers our work on the two separate statutory audits of the County Council and of the Pension Fund. As last year, we've also produced a sort of one-page summary for you, because we're conscious of the fact that because of the requirements of auditing standards and all the various things we do have to cover off in that, it does make the Audit Findings report itself quite a lengthy document. So I hope that one pager is helpful to you. And just to emphasise that, although I think the file name of it does refer to last year, it is very definitely the 1920 document that's there. So high level messages really. But basically, two good sets of accounts have been produced by officers. And as you'll have seen from the reports, no huge changes to the accounts, nothing that's impacting on the bottom line, and all of the changes that we've asked for have been made. There is still this issue around the pension liability for VIA, which has only cropped up in the last week or so, where the changes have still got to be fed through, but we're in dialogue over that, so that will be all fine. There have been some disclosure tweaks in the accounts. One was around the way that the disclosure note on the fair value of loans is shown. And another is just strengthening the disclosures around the uncertainty around the valuation of property, plant and equipment, which is a subject that I'll come back to in a moment. But basically, good set of accounts. And most of the things that are listed in our report as outstanding are now sorted. So we've really just got the sort of final formalities to go through, and touch wood, I am confident that we will be able to meet the deadline of close of play on Monday for giving the opinions on both the county and the pension fund. I just wanted to mention the fact that our opinions on both of these will include what are called emphasis of matter paragraphs. These are not qualifications of our opinions. They are simply paragraphs that we are putting into the opinions to sort of draw the reader's attention to particular disclosures in the accounts. So it's basically, in this case, drawing the reader's attention to the fact that you have disclosed that there is this material uncertainty around the value of property, plant and equipment, and that applies both to the property held directly by the county council, so your own operational and investment properties, and also the investment properties held by the pension fund. And the fact that it's there in the pension fund also means it feeds through into the pension liability notes within figures and notes within the county council accounts. But it's something that basically virtually every local authority up and down the land, a lot of commercial organisations, etc., are all getting these emphasis and matter paragraphs this year. And it stems from guidance issued by RICS to their own valuers, saying that in actually doing valuations as at 31st of March, they need to disclose this material uncertainty, because you think back to 31st of March, how much uncertainty was there in the world at that point? The worst of the first wave of COVID was well underway. Market transactions virtually stopped, so it's very difficult if there is no market operating out there for valuers to actually value things. So that's where that comes from. Nothing for you to be concerned about. Just to mention, amongst your papers, you've also got the draft letters of representation, which are a normal part of the process. It's basically you as the council saying to us as the auditors that you've given it your best shot in terms of preparing a good set of accounts. There's nothing in the wording that we've asked you to use this year which is at all unusual, whereas sometimes, if there are particular issues where we've maybe got a bit less certainty, or you've done something slightly more unusual in terms of transactions, we might be asking for specific representations, but there's nothing like that. And then finally, I just wanted to come back to the impact of COVID. As Glenn has alluded to, it has been a challenging year, both for your teams in terms of putting together accounts and for us in actually auditing those accounts. So, big thanks to everyone involved in the process of putting the accounts together and bearing with us through the audit. And the audit process has taken us a lot longer. It's taken us. We didn't expect it to have as much of an impact as it has had in terms of the time taken, but it's partly because we have actually had to do additional work. So as you will recall, we had to revisit our audit planning to take account of the impact of COVID. We added in an additional significant risk and so on. But I think the bulk of the impact is just simply the impact of remote working, and the fact that both our teams and your teams have been working remotely. It's just reduced that amount of informal contact. It's made it a lot more time consuming to get to the bottom of queries and so on. And we actually think that it has taken us, we've actually increased the resourcing on all of our local government audits by around 40% on average. If you've read the reports thoroughly, you will have seen that we are suggesting that while we bear the bulk of that cost, we are asking our authorities for an additional fee to cover a proportion of it. That proportion meaning an increase in the previously agreed fees of 15%. Clearly not something we like doing, given what has given rise to it, but nevertheless something we think is justified. I think that's probably all I need to say. I've noticed a few hands going up, so quite happy to take any comments or questions.
Rachel, do you want to fire away first? Rachel Madden. No.
I'm not hearing anything.
No, I'm not hearing. Steve Carr, then, please. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry I was a bit late, but it's amazing what turning your computer off and turning it on again does. Page 64, in relation to the pension fund, it says, in some cases, working papers provided to support the accounts and allow for sample selection did not agree back to entries within the statements. That's pretty fundamental auditing. So there is no management response on the papers. What has been done to actually put this right?
I mean, perhaps if I comment on that first, and then maybe a council officer can chip in. I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. It is fundamental to our audit approach to start with the figure in the accounts and work back. And obviously, we need working papers that analyse that figure in the accounts down to the level of the transactions. As far as this year's audit is concerned, I mean, we have obviously done some toing and froing till we got to the point where we did have a satisfactory breakdown, or we understood the reasons for the differences between the figure in the accounts and the figures we were provided with. I mean, basically, we will once the ink has dried on our audit opinions, we will then meet with officers to talk through these sorts of issues and make sure we can address them so that they don't recur in future years. So we've kind of we've dealt with the issue for now in terms of this year's audit, but it is something we need to revisit. And I don't know whether anybody from the council side wants to comment on that as well.
Lynn, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's certainly this year. There's been it's been difficult. Sometimes the information that the auditors have asked for has either been misinterpreted or not understood properly. So it would have been the BSC, I think, that would have provided the pension admin reports. So I think in the first instance they may have not provided the report that they thought the external auditors were asking for. But after to-ins and fro-ins between the pension fund administrators and the external auditors, I think they've arrived at a position where the correct reports have been provided. So I think that might have been the issue.
Okay, you're happy with that, Steve? Okay, the next one I've got on my list is Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. If I can refer to page 29 and the note 29, the same numbers. I've only just noticed. I thought I got confused. Were the adjustments in change that have been made in both be positive for the council?
Can I just check which document we're looking at? Page 29 of.
We're on agenda item 5.
Yeah, is it appendix? Is it the appendix or statement of account?
Accounting adjustments. And it's a note 29, the first bullet point.
Is this the page headed up Audit Adjustments Council, Appendix C in our Audit Findings report?
Pass. I've just got the initial page, the opening page of this item.
Is it on white pages or yellow pages?
It's on white paper. It's the accounting adjustments.
I think it might be on page 68 of our pack, John. Which
would be fine if only I was working from the pack. Which page is it, Lorraine? Which document?
It's the document of Agenda 5.
It's page 32 of the report.
Oh, so it is the one. So this is basically the amendments to the accounts around the fair value disclosures.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but both of the changes that are listed there, both in respect of Lobos and PWLB, they don't actually affect the figures contained within the council's balance sheet. The way it works is that in addition to disclosing the numbers for these loans valued on a particular basis in the balance sheet, you also have to have a disclosure note which shows them valued on a different basis, and it's only that disclosure note that has been affected by this, so it doesn't actually have any impact either way on the council's actual financial position.
Thank you.
Okay.
I shall tell the person who
Next
asked
I've
me
got
to
on my
ask.
list. Okay, Pauline, you happy with that?
I shall pass on the message. Thank you.
Right. The next person I've got on my list is Errol.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm trying to get the camera on. I don't know if you can see my beautiful face.
It's coming. It's not coming up.
Okay.
Go for it anyway, Errol.
They're coming up. Okay. I was looking at page 199.18, which recognizes that the accounts have been prepared during COVID and also recognizes the volatility of change. My question is then, has there been any early indication of any volatility in this?
So is this the actual statement of accounts document that you're looking at? And right, that's the one document I haven't yet got.
I think it links to the pension accounts.
It links to the pension accounts, though.
It links to the pension accounts, yeah.
It links.
Yeah. So when obviously we know that the stock market has taken a dip, but you have to remember that pension fund accounts are kept for a longer period.
Right.
So we're holding on to those assets for a long time, 20 years or more. So there's always going to be market fluctuations within a year or even within a couple of years, that it doesn't really matter to us in terms of the pension fund, in terms of holding on to those accounts. And that's always a situation when it comes to a snapshot, effectively, as a year-end position in terms of what that is. So the statement's right, but I think in your role on the pension funds, I wouldn't be at the moment concerned about what's happening with the pension fund accounts. Yep.
And I think the other thing that I would just add to that, now I actually understand what the question was, is that my take is that the degree of volatility in valuations hasn't actually been as great as was feared. Although we like with the property, plant and equipment, we have got the material uncertainty disclosed. Actually, I don't think the uncertainty was as great as we all feared it was going to be.
And if I may, Chair, to Councillor Allen's previous question on the fair value, the fair value is a theoretical calculation on a number of assumptions, and what John and the team has spotted is one of those assumptions were wrong, which meant that the theoretical calculation should be a slightly different theoretical calculation, but it's not actually affects the accounts.
But theoretical nonetheless.
But theoretical nonetheless.
Theoretical, but quite big.
Just throw that out from you there. Thank you.
Hopefully that explains it better for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Does that help?
Chairman, hey, Bruce.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
You didn't actually move the recommendation for us to
No,
comment.
I've still got one speaker. Yeah, Andy, one sec. Okay, Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd just like to put on record our thanks to everybody involved in putting this together and the audit report, because it's been a lot of work, as has been said, in difficult times. So thank you for that. My question is on the same report as Errol was talking about, the notes to the accounts of the pension fund. which on our pack is page 197. It mentions that the fund deficit at the last triennial valuation was 405 million. Are we anticipating a change? And if so, how will this impact on our pension partners, please?
Do you want to answer that one, Nigel? I think
it's a very good question, and it's the triennial valuation, as it says, is done there every 3 years. So there's always a possibility that if there was a real change in terms of the values of the assets, then we would probably bring forward that valuation. But at the moment, officers and our external advisors are saying that that's not an issue at the moment, and the plan is still to do the recovery, and Keith might correct me, I think it's over 18 years. So we're still on target to achieve that over the next 18 years. And again, it shows the long...
It's like a sort of never-ending process, though, isn't it? Because you will go into the next triennial cycle, obviously well before that 18 years is up, and the size of the deficit will be recalculated at that stage, and then a different process will be started to recover the size of that new deficit over 18 years or however many years is appropriate at that time. So
hopefully less than 18 years.
You never reach that cliff edge.
Well, that's a really good question, actually, Nikki. Are you happy with the response?
Very good question.
I am. Thank you very much. Thanks.
And thank you for your comments. Can I reiterate from the chair your comments at the start? We know it's been difficult, and they worked tirelessly to get this done. Right, I've got Keith. Rachel Madden has sent a message through the message board saying she would like to speak. Are we still on with that? Are you there, Keith?
Yes, that's exactly what I was just going to flag with you, Chair. So yes, Councillor Madden is back on the call and was still hoping to speak. Thank you.
Okay, Rachel, are you up and running?
Yeah, thank you. My equipment at this end isn't working properly.
Okay.
It's because we're on my old laptop rather than the ThinkPad. I always have problems with this one. I'm afraid I'm going to be a bit of a nuisance. I've got about 5 points. So either you're very good at shorthand or we take it one at a time. Which would you prefer?
Go for it. Do you want to go for them all together?
Right. I'm quoting from Appendix B.
Rachel, 1 second, Rachel.
Just, I was going to say, just before you start, if you could clarify whether you're asking about the accounts or about our findings report, that would be helpful to.
Somebody's causing a backlash on the microphone.
Can you hear me all right now?
Not a very good line, Rachel, unfortunately. Try again.
Yeah, as I say, we're on my old laptop rather than the ThinkPad. I'll shout.
That's what we've got ThinkPads for.
I'm quoting from Appendix B. Quote, some elements of the valuation may also be affected by the late changes associated with Brexit, leading to increased audit risk. I understand from the previous questions that you may have covered this already, but is there anything extra you could add that clarifies what this actually means? And for example, what this increased audit risk is that a no-deal Brexit could bring. My second bit is quoted again from Appendix B. The Council has mainly a PWLB debt of 403.5 million plus 95 million non-PWLB debt. Could each member of this committee be given an itemised list of what that debt, the 403.5 debt, was spent on, and whether an audit was done on whether it was value for money for these projects? I understand the government is currently reviewing these loans to secure effective operation of prudential within local councils. We've seen quite a few examples in the media all over the place, from Nottinghamshire down to Selfridge. What communication has the council had with the government about this consultation, which ends on the 31st of July? And then in respect to the 95 million non-PWLB debt, again, I'd like to see an itemised list of what this money was spent on and how this was accrued, and what help on preferential interest rates. Why was that not sought from the Loans Board? Who is this owed to and what interest rates is it accruing? Another quote from again Appendix B: we are required to satisfy ourselves that the Council has made proper arrangements for securing economy, efficiency and effectiveness in its use of resources. This is known as the value for money conclusion. My comment on that is that the Council has virtually £500 million in debt, and yet we are borrowing 28 million to build or spruce up buildings. This dwarfs in the total debt, but it's totemic because it will take this authority to over £500 million, £500 million in debt. Now that half our buildings are empty and staff are working from home, do we consider this value for money? And last but by no means least, on Appendix C of the Statement of Accounts, in this report, states income from council tax is 369.8 million annually. Can you tell us if the Finance Infrastructure and Improvement and Section 151 officer, what effect this COVID will have on this, and whether that communication it is had with borough and district councillors, we are the collectors, let's face it, at that level, what effect this will have on non-payment of council tax, and what effect does he think this pandemic will have on the payment of business rates? How much of this is spent on social care? And the revenue support grant is now at its lowest ever at 7 million. Could he give us the figures for the RSG for every year since 2010? Thank you, I'll leave it at that. I hope you heard that all.
Yeah, what I'm going to do from the chair is pick these off one at a time, if I can, please.
That's why I gave you the option.
Yeah, no, that's fine. The first one is Brexit. Nigel, you've done a risk assessment on the effect of possible effects of Brexit on the authority. I think the best thing to do would be just to inform Councillor Madden or send her an email of where that is within the council agenda and minutes. But do you want to comment?
I won't be able to comment on what the auditor's view is on that, but and you're absolutely right, Chairman, in terms of the assessments that we do or continue to be doing on Brexit risks for the local authority. And I think the plan is to maybe update members at our committee in January around on those particular risks. Okay.
Do you want to comment any further on that, John?
Well, I mean, just to say that, I mean, the way I see it at the moment is that the majority of the risks arising for local authorities from Brexit will primarily be sort of more operational risks rather than directly financial risks. I mean, clearly addressing those operational risks can have an impact on the council's finances. And there could potentially be an impact on sort of asset and liability valuations arising from it, and that's something that we will clearly have to look at in doing our next round of audits. But I think the major headaches for local authorities are likely to be more of the operational nature, really, and the disruption of labour markets and all of that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the first one. The second one was debt. Rachel was asking questions on the figures on where the money has been spent from historically. I think you can just signpost them, can't you, Nigel, to where that information is available?
Yeah, it's in 40 years worth of statements of accounts,
Yes,
Chairman. That's
I'm
the
not going to
problem.
ask you to go talking back from the chair. Rachel, if you want to go through 40 years of accounts, then you're welcome. But I'm not going to have officers wasting their time on that basis. Comments? Any comments on that, Nigel?
Yeah, it's because what it tells you is an awful lot of historical information. So the loans that we take in, including the Lobo loans, which are taken over 40 years and were taken probably 20 years ago. So they weren't taken out last year. So consequently, I wouldn't know why the debt was raised for what expenditure it's been related to the capital program.
I'm not having officers spending their time trawling through that sort of that information. It is available if the members want it by going through the historic data which is available to them, and we're more than happy to furnish you with that data, but I'm not having officers collating that sort of information because it's not a waste of their time, but it is just taking up an inordinate amount of their time when they should be working for the authority.
Can I just chip in there, Chair? Because it sounded to me as if there was a particular concern behind that question around whether or not this council was doing any of the sort of things that a number of other councils have been caught doing. Shall we say in recent years in terms of borrowing to make unwise in investments, and I mean, but basically the position as I understand it with this council is that it has not got into that in any significant way at all. So I don't think it's a concern that you need to have.
Okay, thank you very much. With reference to the next one I've got is the 28 million which is being spent on renovation of buildings. Again, that information is publicly available and is available to members. Am I not right, Nigel?
Yes, and it won't appear in these statement of accounts because that's about spend some of it this year and for future years.
Yeah, and there is a list available for the members if they wish through the relevant committees on the amount of money which is being spent in specific areas of their responsibility. Right, the next one we come on to, which is the council tax, asking for a breakdown on the RSG from 2010. Again, that information is readily available in the published accounts.
Well, it's not, the RSG over a number of years won't be in the accounts, but you could actually pick it from the accounts. But if it's particularly to do with the revenue support grant, if Councillor Madden wants to go onto the MHCLG website and look at the local government settlement for 2021, there is within there one spreadsheet that sets out for Nottinghamshire, as it would for any council, what has been the RSG over the previous 6 years.
Right.
So that information can be available. Yep.
That information is available to you, Rachel. If you do that, you need to go on the website to be able to access that information.
The other question, Chairman, was around the council tax in terms of the impact of COVID. And
which is a good question, actually.
It is a good question, and one that we're reporting to Finance and Major Contracts Management Committee on Monday. So the papers are in the public domain that sets out how we've assessed what that issue is around council tax, and not only the collection fund issue, but also what our assumptions are around the underlying reduction potentially in the tax base for a couple of years, maybe. It might take 2 years for the economy to recover and take us back to parity on council tax, albeit at the same time there are growth still because house building is still taking place.
Yeah.
But we have assessed it around 8 million on council tax and a couple of million on business rates. And that is because we do meet with our colleagues in the district councils on a weekly basis. and also from they do share their delta returns with us in terms of what they say is the impact on council tax and business rates for them, but we won't know the full picture on the tax base until the 15th of January, which is the date that district councils, our billing authorities, have to notify us in terms of what the tax base calculation is. And that is a very complex calculation because of all the benefits, the universal credits, the single person's discounts and house building growth. So we rely on our billing authorities, but I can assure Councillor Madden that we are talking to our district council colleagues on a weekly basis.
Okay, thank you very much, Nigel. Right,
just coming out there on that issue, because I have some information on that. As many of you know, on my dual-hatted business, I'm deputy leader Broxtowe Borough Council, and at the moment, the finance officers in all the districts and boroughs are having to deal with the very, very complex issue of having to give 4 separate grants to businesses, and this is having to be done manually. Now, council tax income is substantially down. Of course, that affects the boroughs and the districts, but it affects the county council far more than it does the boroughs and districts. And the Broxtowe Borough Council actually said, wouldn't it be a good idea if you could second somebody from your finance department to ours, because we've actually had to take somebody off the council tax department to actually deal with the backlog and try and get the money in, to actually make sure that businesses get the grants because they've had to close. And this was supported by Councillor Richard Jackson, but the officers at the county council said no, which I think is was a very, very good try and help ease your council tax shortfall issue.
I'm grateful for the statement, Councillor Carr, but at the same time, central government does provide the billing authorities with additional monies in support of their additional burdens in delivering those grants.
Fine. Okay. Can I make a comment from the chair, specifically pointed at you, Rachel, if you can? Whoever is generating a great long list of questions, I've no problem with that. But if it impacts on the work of the staff of the county council and creates a massive bureaucracy and time-wasting exercise, gathering masses of information which is already out in the public domain, I will draw a line and stop. The route you should take is to go down the freedom of information route, where there is a specific system put in place and the checks and balances to find out whether the information that is required is correct and is allowed. So can I suggest that in future, if you do have a great long list that's created by somebody, that you go down that route to gather that sort of information? Okay. Yes,
Chairman.
Sorry, Richard. Yeah.
Could I just add to that? It might be helpful for Councillor Madden, because it's a huge amount of work to do, as you just pointed out, to go through historical information, and it's a huge amount of work for a councillor to do as well. Perhaps research officers might be able to help out for looking at historical information through council records, etc.
Okay, fine. But within your questions, Rachel, there were 1 or 2 nuggets. Of that, there was no doubt, and so I thank you for those. Okay, do I have a seconder for the recommendation, please?
I'll second it, Chairman.
Right, all those in favour then, please, of the recommendation, put your hand up. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. So we'll then go straight on to internal audit. Rob.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. We actually have Simon Lacey's on the call with us today. Simon's our internal audit team manager. So
I'll get it right eventually.
That's fine.
I'm doing well today.
That's okay. I'll hand over to Simon, who's going to take you through the report, and then I'll happily come in afterwards to help out with any questions if needed. Thank you.
Morning, Chairman. Morning, all. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Morning, Simon.
Good morning. I was going to run through the report. This is our next termed plan. As it mentions on paragraph 1, we're slightly out of sync because of the COVID situation. we would normally bring you a term 3 plan and a full progress report for the term, but we're still in the term 2, so we're going to bring you that in March, so we're then back in the normal cycle of events. But we've given you a brief overview of what we've been doing. We've been continuing our audit work. We have been focusing on COVID responses by providing some advisory consultancy work. We've started to move back into our assurance pieces of work, and we've made sure that that is proportionate to the input with the frontline services. We have deliberately
Can you ring back, please? I'm just chairing a meeting.
Sorry, we have deliberately made sure we've deliberately made sure we are focusing on those that give the council the best coverage of assurance through that coverage of work and responding to the advisory role we've taken. So that work will continue and also continues within term 3. We've also had some significant notes of events. Our graduate trainee who's been working with us has actually secured a permanent job now within the council, and he's provided with some valuable work during the year, particularly on the COVID scenario. We introduced you to the new 2 apprentices earlier in the year. They've now embedded into the team, although we admit that really we underestimated the amount of impact COVID would have, particularly on onboarding new staff and providing them with on-the-job training. It's been more difficult during this remote period, as you can imagine, and also making sure that they're continuing their professional studies, again, remotely with our external provider. But it's good news, they've settled in well and they're providing us with good work and good coverage as well. We've also taken on board one of the Change 100 programmes through the Nottinghamshire charity, and that lady's provided us with valuable insight and actually taking on board some work within our place department. So although it's been a challenging period, the table under paragraph 7 identifies you with what work we have covered across all areas. So we continue with the advisory work, providing both management members, the head of internal audit with assurance. We've provided advisory, giving colleagues advice on an audit, counter-fraud perspective. We've also promoted the Counter-Fraud Awareness Week. We've also provided alerts and dissemination of information to keep that message going. And as you're aware, we've taken on board the role of looking at the corporate risk register and identifying a new methodology for that process. So really, it's an interim position on progress, but it's very, very positive and very valued. In terms of the plan for term 3, again, we are continue to do our risk assessment. We have done the risk assessment on the pieces of activity we plan to do, but we've also been very conscious within this plan that interrupting the critical services on frontline, we don't want to actually make sure that we keep that flowing comfortably so services can be delivered. So our plan is to continue to focus, as it's identified in table on Appendix 1 and at paragraph 13, on the county-wide major pieces of corporate governance work, providing the council with valid assurance and reducing the amount of involvement within our externally facing departments such as children and adults, so that they can get on with more pressing areas under the COVID pandemic. Appendix 1 gives you the details of the individual assignments, but really I think that's the headline messages that we really wanted to cover with you this morning, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Simon. Sorry about that interruption. The
no problem.
phone's been going absolutely crazy. Have I got any questions for Simon, please? I think it was a very comprehensive report. I'm good to see our apprentices are settling in well. I think that is a real positive. It is such a pleasure to see all these young faces wandering around the authority. I'll wait for. I've got Rachel. Rachel, yeah. You got a question? No. Anyway, so thank you very much for the report. Keith, I've got problems with Rachel getting through. Rachel?
I think she is just there. Just vaguely, Councillor Madden. I don't know whether you can get closer to the microphone at all.
Yeah, very quiet.
I'll keep shouting, Chair. I'll keep shouting. It's just a quick one about council tax losses. As you know, council tax fraud can occur when they claim a discount, single person's discount, for example. Annually, we'd lose about 133 million, I think. So obviously it has an impact on all councils' finances. How many residents were actually prosecuted for falsely claiming council tax discount, for instance? And what do you think it does actually cost this council in revenue? Thank you, Chair.
If you may, Chairman, I could answer that.
Yeah, go on, Nigel. Yeah.
Sorry, I was quiet then, wasn't I, Chairman? I do apologise. Yeah, I think Councillor Madden is probably confusing us with the district council. We're not responsible for collecting council tax or managing council tax or around council tax fraud. So our internal audit would not be managing or being audited or responsible, and we would not have the statistics therefore on the activities of the district councils and the way that they go about managing or prosecuting for fraud.
Yeah, thank you for that. That should have come from me, Nigel, really. Rachel, you need to have a chat with the person that's generating the question and explain to them that they recognise they need to work out the different authorities and their areas of responsibility on that particular issue. Okay, any other questions, really? Comments? No? So we'll go then. So can I have a seconder, please, for the recommendation, Vice Chairman?
I'll second the recommendations, Chairman.
Okay, the recommendations on page 213. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, let's go on to the next one, which is agenda item 7, the Committee on Standards of Public Life.
Yes, that's me. Thank you, Councillor Lawton. Morning, everybody. So this report is to seek approval on the Council's response to be sent to the Committee on Standards in Public Life, and that's regarding our progress with implementing their best practice recommendations. A couple of years ago, the committee made 26 main recommendations, and members will recall that one of those related to the Local Government Association drafting a new model code of conduct for members, and we had an item previously about that earlier this year. In addition to the main recommendations, there were 15 recommendations which the committee felt would improve best practice, and those recommendations and the Council's draft proposed response is attached as an appendix to the report. That's at page 223 onwards. At this stage, the County Council hasn't specifically sought to change or implement these recommendations. Some we're already doing, but where changes were proposed, we felt that many of them should probably be included in the new model code of conduct. So as a result, we've essentially adopted a wait and see approach before deciding if any further action is required locally. I think that underlines the position that the committee took with regard to its response to the draft model code of conduct. The main point, I think, being that if the code is stronger and clearer on all of these issues, it gives a more robust baseline for all councils, rather than reverting to local variations of how each proposal is interpreted. So as a result, the draft response reflects that position, and although it does say a few words on the council's current position, it also indicates that we're proposing awaiting the final version of the model code and then come back and revisit the best practice recommendations when we know what is in and what is not in the model code. In considering the recommendations, we've invited the Council's 3 independent persons to today's meeting, and the Chairman introduced them earlier. So I'll hand back to the Chairman now before taking any questions.
Right, Keith, have you got a specific order that you want the independent persons to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think would agree that it would be Rob White first, and then Craig Cole, and then Ian Bain.
Okay, Rob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for inviting me to speak, and good morning, everybody. Can I just say that I'm content with the broad thrust of this report. I do, however, have some thoughts on some aspects of 3 of the proposed responses, on the numbered best practice recommendations. This is page 223 of your agenda, the yellow sheet, and starting down the bottom. My first comment is on item 3, the suggested response there. I do agree that annual review is excessive. I am, however, hesitant about the alternative suggestion of regular review because of the differing interpretations which could be placed on the term regular. I mean, what seems regular to one person might not seem very regular to somebody else. So my feeling is that there ought to be a specified minimum period, and to my mind, somewhere in the range of 2 to 5 years would be appropriate. That's quite a broad range. What I'm saying is a minimum of 5 years, I suppose, and anything up to every 2 years. But I do agree that every year is excessive. The next point I have to make is on the very next item over the page, number 4. And this is to do with the suggestion about hard copies of the code on council premises. I do accept that it wouldn't be strictly necessary to have hard copies of the code available on council premises, but I am inclined to think that it might be desirable. To me, the difference would appear to be between having a document which advertises itself as being available and easy to consult, perhaps on view, and on the other hand, one that has to be specifically requested. If it has to be specifically requested, then you have to previously know that it exists. So my feeling is that it might be the better of the two alternatives. I don't feel very strongly about it, I have to say, but I personally am inclined towards the suggestion of having hard copies available on council premises. And my final comment relates to item 8. And that's to do with the question of whether IPs should be consulted about allegations that are felt to be meritless or vexatious or trivial, and the suggestion in the response is that the monitoring officer should deal with that without needing to consult IPs. I'm perfectly happy with that. I've got no real issue with that, but just to say to you that if you decide otherwise, in other words, if you decide that IPs should be consulted in that circumstance, I personally would have no problem with that either. You know, I wouldn't regard that as a waste of my time or anything like that. So what I'm really saying about that one is that I don't really mind which of those two options you choose. That's all I want to say, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Hi, Heather. Do you want to respond on those? I mean, from the Chair's point of view, the first point, I have no issue. You know what I mean? That sounds a sensible suggestion. The second suggestion, that sounds a sensible suggestion. And the third one, comment.
Yes, well, I would agree with your assessment. I mean, the question is whether we change the response now or whether we pick these up when it comes back, when we know what's in the model code. So that's a question, but I can modify the responses to include something along those lines if that's what committee would like. In terms of consulting the IPs, well, it's a balance, isn't it? And obviously the role of the monitoring officer is always a delicate one to manage different situations as they arise. And I suppose some complaints that come in are extremely minor. And we're mindful of the fact that the independent persons are a voluntary role. So there is that issue of balance and proportionality about whether, you know, how that relationship is managed. But absolutely, it's nice to hear that that wouldn't be an issue for Rob. So thank you for that.
I personally think from the chair, I don't know what the committee think, but we need to change it. I would think change the response at the same time, obviously. That's the first point. The second point I'd just like to make, this is one of the reasons why I am pro having an independent member on the Governance and Ethics Committee, because an independent person brings a clarity to our operations which elected members don't, unfortunately, because they're obviously too heavily involved in the operations of the council, etc., and cross-examining it. So thank you for your comments, Rob. Would you like to respond to what we've just said?
I'm entirely happy with the response. Thank you for your kind comments, and I'm happy about the suggestion that that Heather makes as to how it's taken forward. But as I say, I wouldn't regard it as being a waste of my time or a triviality if I was consulted about such matters in item 8. I don't mind one way or the other. I just want you to know that I'm happy if that's the course that you want to take. Thank you.
Right, okay, Keith, is it Ian next or who is it next?
It's Keith. Craig next, Craig Cole.
Craig.
Hi, thanks everyone. Thank you, Chair. I'm in broad agreement with what's been recommended as well. I just got 2 points I would like to raise, both on page 223. The first one is around the word likely to adopt the provision in relation to bullying. I was wondering if this could be given a bit more weight. I understand it's difficult to be able to say that we will adopt it if we don't know what that provision is. But would like to think that it would be accepted and adopted, or maybe like Heather's just suggested, that we wait and see what the model code says and take it from there. I've just think that it definitely should be included, issues around bullying and harassment, and I think giving a list of definitions would be good as well. My other point I wanted to make was the point that Rob's already made, which is in relation to point 3 around regular review. I think it's a bit vague and open to interpretation. I think we've already covered that point. I just wanted to raise it again. And that's it from me. Thank you.
You want to respond to those 2 comments, Heather?
Yes, well, obviously the regular review we've already covered, and we can make some adjustments there. Excuse me. In terms of the word likely, I couldn't quite pick it up there, Craig, but I think you were referring to item 1 regarding bullying and harassment.
Yeah, that's
right. Thank you. I mean, obviously, I was just maintaining impartiality on the basis that ultimately it's the decision of the committee what we do and don't adopt. But if it's in the model code, I think the expectation of the committee on standards in public life would be that councils will adopt the model code pretty much lock, stock and barrel. I think that's the purpose in having a national code and a model that people can pick up. And that was one of their concerns when they first undertook their work, was about the variations from council to council. So perhaps I should see if there's another word that is less vague than likely, but that was the reason I used that word, was simply to sort of defer to committee's actual decision.
Okay, Craig, are you happy with that response?
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
Okay, and our final independent member, please.
Good morning. There's most of this being covered by Robert and Craig, but there's just a couple of points I'd like to make. Firstly, on question 1, I think there should be a definition of harassment. And on question 8, if you've got independent persons there, use them. If they could give you a profile and monitor any complaints that come through. So when if a complaint's been made and it's investigated, whether malicious or not, whether investigated or not, it's a good idea to let the IPs know. Those are the only points I've got. The others have been covered by Rob and Craig. Thank you.
Again, Heather, do you want to respond to the first one and then I'll talk about the second one, or respond to them both really? And
yeah, in relation to the issue of a definition of harassment, I wouldn't disagree. I think there's a number of things in the code which I think when we went back with the council's response earlier in the year, we suggested that they needed firming up so that there was clarity for everybody about what was included and what wasn't included. I would agree that the term harassment would also benefit from being clearly defined if there's a way in which to do that, granting that harassment can probably take a number of different forms. In relation to the use of the IPs, I think my earlier response probably covers it, Chairman, in terms of it being a delicate balance, and obviously the monitoring officer's got the statutory duty to fulfil that role. So I think it's a relationship that we can develop further with the independent persons, certainly.
Marge, do you have a comment on that? on the independent person's response
to
any complaints?
Yeah. So I am always, I think Heather's alluded to this, I am always conscious of that the independent persons are you know, they get paid for this role, and I don't want to overburden them. And Heather has referred to, so some of the complaints are very trivial, so of the nature of X member hasn't responded to my question or my email. So I, you know, really, you know, I don't think I want to. I think I should just deal with that with the member concerned. I don't think I should involve the independent persons in that. I do think when it's more serious, I think that is something, and we have consulted. I certainly have consulted the independent persons on some of the more serious recent complaints that we've had in the last 6 months. So I do think that has to be a judgment, would be my observation there. The thing about harassment, I do think, and the definition of harassment, I think that should be in the code. And I would remind members there is already a legal definition of harassment, actually. So, you know, having multiple definitions, we need to make sure that it is not necessarily helpful. I would want to see that in the code itself, though, myself.
Yeah,
those would be my observations.
As long as the committee are quite happy, do I have an input? Oh, sorry, I've got. I have got. I'll bring in a second, Steve and Nikki. From the chair's point of view, first of all, thank you guys for your input. It's excellent. As I said before, it is a clarity to your thought process is quite refreshing, to say the least. The second point I'd like to make is that obviously the independent persons group as a whole have come up with a unanimity of a view over they'd like to be consulted more regularly, and I think we need to take cognizance of that. We need to take that view on board, Marge, if you
that's fine.
If you're okay with that. You know, it's a willing horse, isn't it? If you understand where I'm coming from, and we need to take advantage of that.
No, I agree with that, Councillor Lawton.
So with those two comments, I'll bring in Steve Carr. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I think just with several of these, I agree with what some of the officers have been saying. It's right to wait to see what the outcome is, and I think that's sensible. Just quickly though, as Marge has alluded to, there is a legal definition of both bullying and harassment, which we can incorporate into the code, and that's a very wise thing to do. I don't agree that it's onerous to review it yearly, because if you include it in your work programme and there's no need for changing the code of conduct, all you need to do is say, no, we don't need to actually make any changes. But what it does do, it gives you councillors the opportunity to review what's been happening over the previous 12 months and actually be in a position to actually know that there's an opportunity to change it coming up at the Governance and Ethics Committee. I agree totally with the independent persons present that they should be used more often. But I have a suggestion, because this is really, really important, and bearing in mind that we've got elections next year as well, that perhaps like we have done with the communications and the new hub for councillors, we've had a working party. I think that once the LGA new code of conduct guidelines come out, that we should have a working party from this committee to actually thrash out what's going to be in the code of conduct, and then you've got both officer, independent person and councillor input into the new code of conduct. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, comments. I mean, Marge is just putting a thumb up, and I think that you've got a thumb up from me as well. So there you go on those comments. Any views on that particular issue from Steve? Anybody? No.
I think the idea of a working group is a good one, to look at what our code would be and reflect how we want to reflect things in that. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And I have to say this: the working groups that have been doing work on behalf of this committee have done excellent work in the past, and long may it continue. Okay, Are you happy with that, Steve? I think you are, because okay, Nikki Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I obviously, looking at this item 1 about harassment and bullying, of course there are already legal definitions, so I agree with that, but I find it a little bit, it says supplemented with a list of examples of the sort of behaviour covered by such a definition. My fear with that is that you end up with a list of, and then somebody who breaches the code isn't covered in that list, and are you a hostage to fortune then with that? So that's just a comment really about that. So I don't really understand why they've suggested that. But then my other comment was with regard to item 4, item 14. It may be just me not understanding the way the answer is written, or I don't know, but it looks like as if there's a sort of lack of transparency there. I'm not sure why. We wouldn't want to. Let me read it. The matter of individual authorities to determine appropriate reporting arrangements, and I don't understand. It may be just the way it's written, but I don't understand it. Sorry.
Should I come back on that one, Chairman?
Yeah, go for it, Heather.
Yeah. I accept that perhaps it's written more from a legal perspective, and I've got my legal hat thinking about issues around commercial sensitivity and confidentiality, and perhaps that sort of took over the flavour of the response, so I can only apologise for that. The Council does take reports on performance of the arm's length bodies it's set up to different committees, the relevant committees of council. So I think one goes to VIA, for instance, about VIA to Communities in Place committee, or the Review and Development Committee there, and other ones go elsewhere. So I can adjust the response to capture that. I think the other thing is that it's a bit unclear what they were really getting at here, because obviously most of this is about the code of conduct and standards relating to members specifically, and then this sort of delves into a different area. So I've had another look at the very original report from the Committee on Standards in Public Life to try and understand more contextually what they were driving at with this recommendation. And I think they were looking at a broader range of issues around things like thinking, when you're setting up new companies and arm's length bodies, about what the relationship will be between members and officers of the council and that new body, arranging for training about how members will need to conduct themselves in their different roles, and particularly as directors of companies and things like that. And I know that this authority has done those things. We have given thought to that. However, things move on, and it's always a good idea to take stock and consider things. And I am in dialogue with colleagues in internal audit actually about some of those issues. And so we will be thinking about the issue of governance generally with regard to the external bodies that the council has, and we can consider the Committee on Standards in Public Life's findings and worries about that in that context, and perhaps we could take that issue into the working group if that's considered helpful.
Sounds good to me. Everybody happy with that? Yeah. Okay, next one, Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got no truck with any of these. I'm firmly in favour of all of them, really. It's just a comment to follow on from what Rob White said earlier. The review of the Code of Conduct, item 3. Rob suggests probably 2 to 5 years. How about writing it into our constitution that review the Code of Conduct at least once during every administration, or as is necessary if it does become necessary. That's what I've got to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Do you want to comment on that, Heather?
Well, obviously we've got a range of views now on what the correct duration is, going from annually all the way through to 2 to 5 years.
Let me put some clarity to it. The situation is, even if we set a time stipulation, which I've no issue with, it being yearly. but from the chair, any reasonable chairman would listen to representation which should come through from any member if there was an issue with the code of conduct and they wished it to come back in front of the committee. From my point of view, that is the view I would take as chairman. I would have a word with my officers and ask them to revisit the code of conduct as a matter of the responsibility that I have as chairman to listen to members of the authority. And that's the route I would take. So I really, setting a time is setting a time. I agree with that, but that's what the chairman's job and the vice chairman's job is all about. Is about listening to members and bringing in front of committee those issues which are important. Steve.
He's muted.
Steve, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Just on that point, Chair, yes, you are a reasonable chair, but who's to say in the future that we might get a reasonable chair? Also, getting around what Nikki said with regards to the examples you write, and it has to be accompanied by the phrase, but not an exhaustive list. Absolutely. And also, I hate the word trivial. Trivial is a subjective thing. You know, one person might think it's trivial, another one might think it's really important. Perhaps the word minor could be used instead of trivial. Thank you.
You get some thumbs up, you are, Steve, at the moment. Right.
Well, I'm just so happy to do this yesterday for Broxtowe.
John.
Yeah, I was going to agree with Steve. If we write it into the work programme annually, when we get to that particular place, we can say, actually, there's no need to review it this year and move on. So the provision's there if people have an issue, but hopefully it won't need reviewing on an annual basis.
Annual's the consensus by the looks of it, Heather. I'm not going to hold a vote, but annual seems to be the way forward.
I'm happy to change it to reflect that.
Okay, John, you put your hand up again. Is you historic?
I think it's a legacy.
Yeah, it's historic. Right. Okay. So the recommendation then is on page. It's amazing, isn't it? Some of these papers, you think they'll just flow straight through, and others take. Anyway, the timeliness of them. Right. Recommendation is on page 2. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second them, Chairman.
Okay. All those in favour, put your hands up. Could I, from the chair, say thank you, Rob, Ian and Craig, for your attendance and your input. Most valuable and very welcome, I can assure you. Okay.
Pleasure, Chairman, and thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Right, we'll go straight on to agenda item 8, members' communication and engagement programme. Heather?
Yes, that's me again.
It's the last one, you see, I've got it right.
Best to the last. Okay, so this is the report which follows a very similar format to the last report that members had on the members hub that we brought to the last meeting, and it sets out general progress which we've made with regard to the training and development strand of the programme. It goes through the various actions in the plan and sets out broad progress against each one. As the report makes clear, progress has been impacted by the pandemic, and you know, that's regrettable, obviously, but things are still happening. We've had training during the year. There was health and safety early in the year. We had the independent persons training earlier in the year, and also obviously new ICT devices have been rolled out to a few people. We've had the smartphone rollout, so there's been training going on. Recently we've had the unconscious bias training, and we're looking to set up a session on social media. That'll probably be in January now, sort of mindful of the fact that that's a method of communication for many members, and also the sort of links of that into code of conduct issues, etc. So we're hoping to put together a session on that coming up. We're also working on a broader member induction and development programme, and we've appended an outline of that to the report today, so be interested to hear any feedback on that. I've mentioned in the report the limited training budget that's available. So obviously some of this training will just come through a programme and be delivered by officers as part of induction and the general setup after the elections. But as we go forward through each year, there may be specific training that's required, and there is a limited budget there. So it's about how can we dish that out in a way that's fair, but also provides members with the training they're looking for. And we're also looking at the link between the Members Hub, which gives you a link into the Learning and Development portal, and how that works for you. So it's a single point of access. So we're hoping that those issues of detail will be discussed at the next members working group, which is to be held before Christmas. I know that at the last working group that was held on the 19th of November, Councillor Sissons, as the chairman of the working group, asked if I could run through just a quick note on what that group looked at and talked about to bring you up to speed, if you'd like me to do that, Chairman. Yeah, okay. So we had a refresher session for all the members on how the hub worked. So we brought up the live hub and worked through it with members in the meeting. And we looked at each of the individual tiles. You remember there's a tile for each different subject. So we looked at the council diary. No need for any adjustment there. It's a simple tile. It does what it says on the tin effectively. The media information, members were happy with that and liked the fact that it contained current information in one easily accessible place. The YouTube links we looked at, and members were very clear they wanted that linking into the YouTube link for committee meetings specifically, because obviously there's a range of things on the council's YouTube account. So it'll link specifically to the playlists on council meetings. Highways, members were very happy with the link to the page on highways and felt that it gave all the sort of information that they would use regularly as part of their roles. But they did think it would be helpful to have something similar for social care work, both children's and adults, and in relation to the MASH, so that there was some clarity there about where to go for various things and the sort of work that was undertaken and the type of frequently asked questions that members might have. So we need to look into that a little bit more, work out how that can be delivered. The code of conduct was the fifth tile. Members felt that this was important and needed some prominence, but they weren't sure it was absolutely necessary to have its own tile on the members hub. So I think probably some further consideration is required around that, because obviously the code is central to members' roles and there is some useful and important information there. I think possibly what was driving that consideration about whether to drop that tile was the conversation we had about the fact that if you put too many tiles on the front page, then it can lose its impact. So it's about getting the balance there between the information you need and require and not having so much that the page is too busy. So we'll come up with some options and see what it looks like, and then obviously members can and will decide at the end of the day. Training and development, we looked at the landing page on the learning portal for that, and members were happy with the demonstration that was given there, but agreed that some more dedicated content was required, as well as a refresher on members' usernames and passwords so that members can actually get into it. And it was also, I think, when we looked at how the personal record could work, members thought that would be really helpful, because then you can book onto events and it keeps a record of what you've actually done in one single place. So I think a question was raised as to whether we could load up some of the events from the induction programme into that, so when members know what they want to attend, and then it'll show that they've attended those events when they've been to them, and we thought that was a helpful element of it. Other content, so members also requested an updated contacts list of key service leads in each area for assistance with managing queries and issues as they arise. I've taken that away as an action to speak to my colleague Marie Rowney about that, because members will recall one of the other strands of this programme of work is to look at how members' complaints and queries are handled. So I just want to make sure we're all joined up with that and we're not cutting across each other. But I absolutely understand why members would want clear contact information. And I think finally, the difference between how different members work as individuals, as well as their different skill sets with regard to technology, came out through the session. And so that is a reminder to us to ensure that members get a variety of support on IT. And I think the viewers that have dedicated tile on IT support would be very helpful for members, as well as more regular support with using technology, not just on induction day and then it's over to you and you're left on your own sort of thing. So so that's where we got to in the last working group, Chairman. So hopefully that's a useful update just to explain what the group was doing. I'll hand back over to you.
Comments, Steve?
Yeah, I attended the working group. It was a very, very useful meeting. It was really good to actually interact face to face with the officers that are building this hub and actually meet people that you've never seen before and what have you. But a plea really, is that at the moment you've got a hub that's designed by the officers, the Mansfield Independents and the Liberal Democrats, because there was no representatives from any other the groups on there. And really, if you get a hub that's been designed by those people and you're not particularly like it, then I'm afraid my reaction wasn't it, Heather, that it's tough. If you don't attend a working group, then you won't have any input into what it looks like at the end of it. And I mean that in the nicest and most sincere way.
From the chair, if I may, Steve, I really have no issue with a working group being of a political mix. The working group is there to do the work on behalf of the members, and if they don't do the job, you're not going to politicise it. Do you understand where I'm coming from? And so as a result, I'm more than happy with the responses. That's what you're there for. You've been selected by the committee, with a chair, get on with it, if you see where I'm coming from.
That's what we did, Chair.
Yeah, that's fair, that's good. Andy?
Yeah, if I may, the reason I asked Heather to give us that little report, which was very, very well done, thank you, Heather, was so that the whole committee had a little flavour of what the working group was doing, because it wasn't as well attended as it could have been for one or two other different reasons. So I'm pleased that Heather's, let all members know the progress that was made, which I think was quite significant for that meeting, and just shows what these working groups do on a cross-party basis, with everybody giving input into the working group, which is really what we're about. This whole committee is a cross-party committee, I like to say, and the working groups are, as you said earlier, very successful. So thank you, Heather, for that report. That I couldn't have said it better than that. You put everything there, and the members' hub, yes, it was thoroughly taken apart, if you like, by the members in discussions, and valuable input put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Then yes, thank you, Heather. Just another point that just has come to mind really is more following on from what Steve had got to say. It's one of the reasons why I don't chair the working groups, Steve, is because it's important that the responses come from within the body of the committee, and my job as chair is to oversee that and allow the committee to have its voice. So, and I think that is extremely important within any committee. Okay, Errol.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, I think I have some problems with.
No.
I think you're on silent, Errol. You're on silent.
Speaking to myself.
Yeah, that's it. You've got it now. You're with us now.
Yeah. I was saying that I am a member of the working group, but unfortunately, the last meeting I couldn't attend. But hopefully making myself available for the next ones. The thing I was going to ask about is that are we going to have a sort of a dedicated training contact within HR to support members with what I believe is going to be a huge cultural shift? Some of the training, for example, is going to be self-led and also online. So I know some members aren't as au fait with some of these electronic gadgets as before. So we just wondered if you can have some contact within HR, which is with members can sort of get help from.
Heather?
Well, I think we need to work through how that works. I mean, I would absolutely agree that members need some additional support. How we tailor that, it may be with some additional feed-in from group support officers, as well as other members of the governance team in democratic services. So certainly we need to have a dialogue about that and make sure that members have the support that is required. Absolutely. I think Marge was wanting to come in on that as well.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
Marge, I was just sort of
No, it's okay. No. I was
for the members first.
I wanted to pick up on something that was said earlier, but on that particular point, Councillor Henry, I'm more than happy, as Heather says, to look at the best way to do that. And I'd suggest we have that discussion at the next meeting of the group about how would be best to do that, because we may need that in that way, or we may need it in a different way. So I think let's have a conversation about what would work, I think, best there. The other bit I just wanted to pick up was the bit about the code of conduct. I really would absolutely advise, I would say this, wouldn't I? I really would advise us to have the members' code of conduct there readily accessible. I'd also advise us to have the member officer code of conduct there readily accessible, given some recent issues that have arisen. And then it's very easy if, for example, in dealing with an issue, I need to direct a member to where they can find that. That's very easy to do, and if I'm perfectly frank, there's no excuse for any members because they've all got access to it. So I would urge us to have that as a tile. Would be my view on that. I would say that, wouldn't I?
Run it through the working group, Marge. Run it through the working group.
Well done. We'll do that next time.
Steve, you still got your hand up. Is it a legacy or? Yeah, okay. Right, okay. Marge, your hand is still up. Do you want?
Oh, sorry. No, put it down.
Okay.
Go down.
From the chair, you've obviously got issues that you need to deal with, Andy, and do you take those on board? Thank you for your work you've put in. Thank you, Heather, for the work that you've put in. You know, this will be a valuable resource for members. And that's what we're trying to create. And if we can create that, then that's, all the better. Makes our job easier. Keith, while I'm thinking, are you there?
Yes, I'm there, Chair.
While I'm remembering, before I go for the proposing a second to go to the vote, John Gregory will need to be put on the list of hard copies for the agenda, because obviously he was having difficulty accessing which pages on the meeting, which was causing confusion when members were asking questions. So I think we can streamline that by putting him on the hard copy circulation when he is attending meetings. Is that okay?
That's absolutely fine. I'll get in touch with John. Okay,
that's great. Thank you very much. Right, do I have a seconder then, please, for the recommendation?
Yes, Chairman, I'll second the recommendation.
I'll propose the recommendation, which is on page 3. Everybody in favour? Thank you very much, everybody. We will then go straight on to the work programme. Do you want to comment on that, Marge, or?
No, I hadn't really got
anything
to add to it, no.
Okay. Richard Butler, could you give me a bell, please, if you're still on, if you're listening?
Yes, I shall be delighted to, Bruce.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, everybody, for their attendance. And I'm sure that I've been very much enjoyed doing the meeting today. And so thank you for your input. Okay.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you.
All.
Bye.
Bye bye.